This is Far From Home. I'm Scott Gurian, and as COVID-19 continues to spread, I've been curious to hear stories of how it's affecting people around the world in interesting or unexpected ways. A while back, I heard about this strange phenomenon that was taking place in the eastern Canadian province of New Brunswick, as well as in Newfoundland and Labrador. So I did some research, and I found this guy named Mike Hickey, who seemed like the perfect person to explain to me what was going on. Mike's a writer and a filmmaker living in St. John's, the capital of Newfoundland, and I actually spoke to him several weeks ago, but shortly after our interview, those protests broke out following the death of George Floyd, so it didn't really seem like a good time to release something that was a bit more lighthearted, as our conversation was. Things have calmed down quite a bit since then, however, so I wanted to return to that interview now, because I think it raises some interesting questions about this strange world we're all now living in. I asked Mike to begin by describing what the situation with COVID-19 is like where he lives.
The province has, I think it's just a little less than 500,000 people total, and most of them live on the island. So Newfoundland and Labrador, there's Labrador portion is on the mainland, Newfoundland is an island. And because it's an island, because it's so remote, most of those cases have been in the city. I think like 75 or 80% of them are sourced to a single outbreak where somebody with COVID went to a funeral home and like 200 people ended up with it from that. And other than that, it's been really contained. People were really good about it and were wearing masks and only going to grocery stores and essential services when they had to, and really taking it seriously, and it really helped out. Basically, we were told to maintain social bubbles, and that was kind of the phrasing that they used for it. And the idea was just your household is your social bubble. The people that you kind of have to see through just your circumstances of life are your bubble. So if it's like if you're married, if you have kids, like these are the people that are within your bubble. But because of that, the government actually started instituting a multi-phase plan to get things back to a reasonable way so that it's okay, what can we kind of ease back a little bit to make life a little bit more livable? And back when we hit alert level 4, they allowed us to double bubble, which meant you could pick one other household or one other social bubble that you could kind of pair up with, and you could spend time with them and see them socially. And it was just kind of a way for people to not quite lose their minds. You know, it was just kind of a bit of a reprieve from the same people you see day in and day out. And it was great. It gave people a chance to see family. You know, you see great videos of like grandchildren and grandparents being reunited and all that kind of stuff. And it was really great. And people kind of really needed it. And it was kind of a jolt that really helped us get over the finish line.
So lay out the rules. How do double bubbles work?
It's really simple. It's just, you know, you pick another household, and the idea is that they're the only people you kind of hang out with until you get to the next stage, so that if there is any contamination, it's contained to a smaller group. And when you're doing contact tracing and all those sorts of things that you have to do whenever there's an occurrence of COVID, it's much easier to manage and be aware of who you've been around.
That all sounds great, and I imagine many people were initially thrilled when they learned that they could expand their bubbles. But I understand this has also caused some unexpected tensions with people trying to make the difficult decision of who to include in their bubbles.
Oh, yeah, that's been fun. I decided to start a Double Your Bubble podcast where I talk to people about who they chose to double their bubble, because I saw that it was actually something where you were getting a little bit of tension and you were getting some drama and stories. And yeah, it's kind of fun to talk to people about it, because some people are choosing family. Some people just outright won't talk to me, you know. They're like, you know, I'll tell you the story, but I can't be on the show because I don't want any kind of record of it. So it's really hard for those people to pick a single social bubble to double with. You know, it's definitely something that's caused some pretty serious conversations, and, you know, there's been a racket or two, I think.
And I think one of your guests who best captured the dilemma that some people face is Kim Follett. She's 33 years old. She's married with a young child, and she tried to go about this in the most democratic way possible.
We have 3 sets of grandparents because my parents are divorced. So we had no idea how to make it fair. And we just said one day, the only way to do this is to draw a name out of a hat. And that's the most fair way we could possibly imagine.
And who won?
It was my in-laws. Yeah, the nice part about that is that they just moved to St. John's. So they missed out on some time with him. So it did work out.
Kim said her parents were thankfully okay with the results, but for her, it was still a stressful and emotional decision. Is that something you're hearing from other people as well?
It is, yeah. I've known Kim for a long time and her husband, Craig, and they were really lucky that it ended up being Craig's parents just because they moved to town after not seeing their grandson that much for the first year. And then they're not able to see him because of all this. So it kind of worked out for them in that way, and it was kind of nice. But yeah, I'm hearing that from other people. Kim's the only one that's been that democratic about it, I think, where you just straight up put a name in a hat. But even that is kind of stressful. And it's hard for people. Like I said, I had a friend who I asked to be on the show, and he's like, I can't be on the show about it because it's so stressful for us. It was somebody who has a roommate. Both of them are in relationships, and it was trying to decide who was going to bubble with their, with their partners and all that kind of thing. And it's hard. There was a chance that whoever you were picking to double your bubble with, it could have been months where they were the only people you were able to see. And so it was really stressful, especially at the beginning of it for people, because you didn't know how long this was going to go on.
So I have to ask, what happens if you pick one of your family members or neighbors to pair up with, but then you realize that you actually don't get along with them as well as you thought?
I don't know. You get stuck.
Can you pick someone else?
No, that's the whole thing, is that, and they announced that. And our Minister of Health, Dr. Haggie, is this wonderfully funny man. He's got a really dry sense of humor, and they were doing daily updates. Him, the chief medical officer, Dr. Fitzgerald, and our premier were doing daily updates. And that was one of Dr. Haggie's first things, was like, whoever you pick is who you have. There's no refunds or anything. Like, who you have in your bubble is who you have in your bubble. And if it doesn't work out, you don't get anybody else. But I mean, like I said, Dr. Haggie also had to, at one point, have to tell people not to lick shopping carts. So things have been weird here.
I was telling my housemates about your podcast the other day, and that sparked an interesting conversation where we were trying to decide who we would want to partner up with as a household if we were placed in this situation. There were certain neighbors we immediately ruled out, and we said never in a million years. But then there were other people who I at first thought would make a good match, but then I started second guessing myself. Because I mean, these people seem cool, but would I still enjoy their company after hanging out with them and only them for several weeks or even months of however long this lasts? So I guess it could be really hard to decide, right?
Yeah, it can. We were really lucky. Me and my wife, personally, we chose friends, and it was a friend of mine who's actually from New Brunswick but lives in Newfoundland now. He just lives a few streets over, actually, and he was the best man at my wedding. And he knew about the double bubble thing because it had happened in New Brunswick. And so as they were making announcements that they were going to talk about what you were going to be allowed to do and there was going to be these changes, he was saying that, I think there's this double bubble thing going to happen here. And I said, dibs. We've been really close to them. They live a couple streets over. I think it takes like less than 10 minutes for us to walk from their house and vice versa. We both have dogs and all this kind of stuff. We like hanging out and eating food. We're both in our mid-30s without kids. It's a whole bunch of things that just kind of make it a really good social pairing that way. And we get along great and have a lot of fun, like the same music, like all of the same kind of stuff. And so we've been getting together every weekend, once or twice. And it's been going really good. We've been really lucky that way. But yeah, I mean, it can certainly be something when you're like, okay, do I want to take the risk of just like having only this person to see for the foreseeable future? And what kind of a strain is that going to be on our relationship? And, I know people who are in relationships, but they're relatively new relationships, who are kind of worried that, okay, if I double with this like new person I started seeing just before this happened, is it going to put a like unnecessary strain on a new relationship? But at the same time, they haven't really seen each other that much in the last while. And, there's all kinds of stuff like that.
I've looked online, and there's been a fair amount of discussion of this double bubble thing on Twitter, with people, comparing it to the TV show Survivor, or saying it was worse than picking a prom date. Someone joked that now siblings all across Newfoundland will find out who their mother's favorite child really is. But while some people face this problem of not knowing who to choose for their bubble, other people like John Rich, who you spoke to, are in this situation like when you're kind of in middle school gym class and no one wants to pick you to be on their dodgeball team. So John's 50 years old, and he lives with his wife.
I didn't choose anybody. I couldn't choose anybody. I was looking for people to choose. But, I just, there was nobody out there. So I contacted my family. My sister takes care of my parents, so she took care of the parents. Contacted my brother. He's got his daughter with him now. So, I went and looked out to my friends. Who can I double bubble with? And, I'm shortlisted on all their lists, but here I am with no bubble. I don't even got a stick of gum.
Do you think it's the nature of just your age and the window you're in where you've got an adult kid, but you don't have grandkids? The people that you hang out with either have kids who are younger or they have grandkids and they're seeing grandkids. And like you're kind of in that window in between those two worlds. Do you think, is that kind of it?
Oh, absolutely. I am in the weirdest place in Generation X where I'm taking care of my children and my parents at the same time.
So that's a little sad, but it sounds like John has a sense of humor and isn't taking it too hard. I have to say, I was thinking that the fact that we're having this whole conversation and that double bubbles are such a big and sometimes controversial thing up there in Newfoundland seems to demonstrate how seriously all of you are taking the quarantine regulations. It seems like a far cry from how many people have been treating the lockdown here in America, where there's a certain percentage of the population, in particular parts of the country, that's refusing to even wear masks. So I know having to choose who to include in your bubbles has been difficult for some people, but I just want to applaud all of you for trying your best to follow the rules.
Thank you. Because we're an island, it's been really good for us here. And we have really strict lockdowns right now in terms of, travel in and out of the province. Obviously, because of where we are and because of icebergs and all kinds of things that people tend to enjoy looking at, we're a tourist hotspot. It's a big part of our industry here, and we've kind of turned everybody away. If you don't live here, if you don't get mail to Newfoundland, you don't get to come here right now. And so we all kind of looked at it, I think, as because of the situation we're in geographically, we're in a position that if we can do what we've been doing and get it down, they can ease back a lot of the measures, and we might still be able to enjoy what little summer we get up here. When the weather gets nice, we might be able to go to parks. Every day we're checking updates on our softball league to find out if we're going to be able to play this year. Those kinds of things might start coming back because we are so isolated geographically. If we handled it seriously enough, we'd be able to do that. And that's kind of where we're at. And I think that's why we all kind of took it as seriously and followed the rules as much as possible, because we knew that if we did, we could likely get a return for that a bit quicker than a lot of other places.
Well, Mike Hickey, thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you and everyone in your double bubble continues to stay safe and healthy.
Thanks so much, Scott. I really appreciate you having me on.
Since I spoke with Mike a few weeks ago, the number of COVID cases in Newfoundland and Labrador has continued to decline, so the government has relaxed its rules, first allowing residents to add 6 more people to their bubbles, and now creating a so-called Atlantic bubble, so residents can freely travel to the other Canadian provinces of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island without any restrictions. If you want to hear more of Mike Hickey's Double Your Bubble podcast, you could search for it in whatever app you use to hear this show, and I'll also link to it from my website, farfromhomepodcast.org. And here's my question for all of you. If you were placed in this situation and forced to choose one other household to include in your social bubble, who would it be? Would you choose a close friend, a neighbor, one of your relatives? Leave me a comment on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter and let me know. Or you could write me, as always, at info@farfromhomepodcast.org. Until next time, thanks for listening.